Imagine a family so strange, so mysterious, and yet so irresistibly charming that for more than 6 decades they've haunted our screens, our imaginations, and even our sense of humor. From black and white television screens in 1964 to blockbuster films of the 1990s to Netflix's gothic revival in 2022, and now the breathtaking return of 2025, The Addams Family is not just a show, it is a cultural phenomenon. And in this review, we are diving deep into every shadow, every laugh, every eerie whisper, from the very first appearance of Gomez and Morticia to Wednesday Addams' latest dark legacy.
The true roots go back even further. Of course, Charles Addams' single-panel cartoons and The New Yorker established the family's deadpan wit and affectionate morbidity. But cartoons are a conversation with a page, television is a conversation with a whole country. In September 1964, the United States was basking in the glow of post-war prosperity and network sitcoms that sold a tidy, optimistic portrait of suburban life. Then a show arrived that looked like a haunted house and smiled like a satire. The Addams Family stepped through the door and, with 2 seasons of black and white episodes, taught audiences to laugh at their own idea of normal. The brilliance begins with a tonal inversion. Most sitcoms of the early 60s were reassurance engines. The conflict flares, then fades, and by the tag everyone is hugging at the breakfast table again. The Addams Family keeps the structure but subverts the premise. The weird people are the stable ones. The anxious, judgmental, status-seeking neighbors are the problem. The Addamses aren't a threat to the community, they are a mirror held up to it, calmly, lovingly, and with a perfectly arched Morticia eyebrow. Gomez Addams is not the distant dad of mid-century TV, he is kinetic charm embodied. He adores Morticia openly, exuberantly, shamelessly, which was radical for a primetime husband in 1964. He sword fights for sport, crashes model trains as a stress release, and spends money like a gleeful pyromaniac philanthropist. The role reframes masculinity away from stern authority toward joyous devotion. He is a romantic, a prankster, and a walking rebuttal to the idea that fathers must be emotionally restrained to be respectable. Morticia, forever draped in a black gown that spills across the room like liquid shadow, reverses the TV mom archetype just as profoundly. She is composed but never repressed, maternal without being domestic, elegant without chasing social approval. Her lines are delivered with the dryness of a desert moon. She trims thorny stems and coos over carnivorous plants, yet she embodies a steady, unshakable center, the household's tenor and its taste. She leads not by scolding but by example, calm, intelligent, welcoming of difference, uninterested in conformity. In a decade charging toward change, Morticia registers like a lighthouse in the fog. Wednesday and Pugsley sharpen the satire. Wednesday's macabre interests never feel like pathology, they read as play reframed through a gothic lens. The point isn't that she's broken, but that our idea of wholesome play is culturally manufactured. Her steady gaze and solemn diction make the jokes land twice, first for the incongruity, then for the recognition that childhood seriousness itself is often misunderstood. Pugsley, a cheerful chaos technician, is the sibling embodiment of curiosity without fear. Where other sitcom kids sneak out to joyride, Pugsley sneaks out to test a catapult. The parents don't punish curiosity, they redirect it, turning potential mayhem into family science. Uncle Fester is a masterstroke of grotesque tenderness. The light bulb in the mouth gag is visual comedy that kids can love, but the character's real power is effective. He is odd, largely unemployed, and entirely accepted. The show's joke, told lovingly, is that the Addamses extend a kind of social sanctuary that mainstream society often withholds. Grandmama adds witchy alchemy to that sanctuary. She brews potions the way other grandmothers bake pies. Lurch, the butler, carries the show's quietest irony. He looks like a medieval executioner but acts like a gentle sentinel, a monosyllabic poem of service and stoicism. You rang? Is less a gag than a thesis statement. Even Thing, the disembodied hand, turns body horror into household help. In a universe that accepts a crawling hand as a member of the family, almost anything can be welcomed. Aesthetic choices amplify this ethic. The black and white palette is not a budget artifact, it is a personality. In grayscale, the mansion's textures, spiderweb filigree, wood-carved griffins, taxidermy shadows, become visual rhythm. The cinematography invites us to linger in odd corners, letting the home feel lived in rather than staged. The theme song's finger snaps are not just a catchy hook, they are an invocation, a ritual call that turns the living room into a theater. Every snap is an invitation to suspend the polite fictions of suburbia and enter a moral universe where difference is not a defect but a delight. The jokes themselves operate on layered mechanics. There's the simple visual gag, Fester's bulb, the subversion gag, Morticia's gardening, and the linguistic deadpan, Morticia's velvet-knifed one-liners. But the series also wields social jujitsu. When a neighbor recoils from the family, the Addamses offer hospitality so sincere it becomes a mirror. Who, the show asks, is truly frightening, the people who embrace their oddities or the people who cannot abide them? In story after story, the answer is kind but unflinching. Fear of difference is the real absurdity. Consider how the show reframes institutions. A nervous truant officer arrives to reprimand Wednesday and Pugsley. The family greets him with dignity, snacks, and total cooperation, followed by genuinely curious questions about whether the school encourages individuality. A psychiatrist wanders in, convinced he will find trauma. The family charms him into revealing the narrowness of his own definitions. A homeowners association tries to impose standards. The Addamses, wealthy and secure, treat their rules like quaint suggestions while remaining preternaturally good neighbors. The satire lands because it is not angry. It is amused. The Addams Family suggests that honesty about who you are is stronger than social panic about who you should be. Not everything is pure subversion. The show uses the classic sitcom loop, misunderstanding escalation gracious resolution. But the loop, repeated across dozens of episodes, becomes a ritual of affirmation. Each week, we enter, we worry for the family's social fate, we exit reassured that their bonds are unbreakable. Repetition, the oldest engine of folklore, is used to recode the audience's instincts. After 5 or 6 stories, you stop waiting for the family to be fixed. You start waiting for the world to adjust. Performance is the incubator for all of this. Gomez's frantic energy isn't random, it's choreographed joy. Morticia's stillness isn't rigidity, it's strategy. Lurch's timing is the exact half-beat that lets a laugh track land without flattening the character's dignity. Wednesday's solemnity is not monotone, it's micro-expressive. Pugsley's gung-ho curiosity is just reckless enough to be funny, never so risky that it breaks the show's safety. Fester's physical comedy reads as delight, not danger. These calibrations make a world that children can watch and adults can read, 2 overlapping layers in one broadcast. The writing room understands that macabre without heart curdles, heart without macabre gets saccharine. So it threads needles. A Halloween episode leans into the family's holiday as a civic duty, they see delight where others fear mischief. A Christmas Story refuses to turn the family into parodic Grinches, instead, they perform generosity through their own aesthetic, proving that tradition is a vessel, not a prison. Episodes that flirt with romance always end with the same thesis. Love inside the family is secure, the real conflicts happen at the boundary with a society addicted to sameness. The mansion itself is a character, and not just in the obvious ways. Doors frame comedic entrances with theatrical precision. Staircases invite looming reveals. A bare rug with a reactive jaw is a punchline factory, but it also tells you something subtler. This is a home built from contradictions, a place where the inanimate might wake and the frightening might help. The house refuses to be a mere backdrop, it is a living metaphor for a family that animates the marginal. Compare this to the era's sibling sitcom, The Munsters. There, monsters tried to pass as normal, here, monsters don't care to pass at all. That simple difference reorients every beat. The Addamses don't need validation. Their wealth, confidence, and affection inoculate them against the terror of exclusion. That swagger lets the show push bolder jokes, a PTA meeting defanged by charm, a banker reduced to blushing by Morticia's poise, a scout troop visiting the mansion and leaving with broadened horizons rather than nightmares. Repetition again, the more you visit, the less the oddness shocks, the more the acceptance soothes. Even the smallest bits carry philosophy. Thing, the hand, democratizes usefulness, you don't need a full body to be a full participant. Lurch as you rang? reduces service to a rhythm of attentiveness. What matters is that the bell, literal or figurative, is answered. Fester's light bulb makes visible what love already does in the house. It illuminates without demanding the source fit a standard socket. If there's a critique to level, and a full review must, it's that the episodic formula sometimes hides laziness. Some mid-season plots recycle the same intruder panic resolution path without new insight. A few gags lean more on props than ideas. And the laugh track, while a staple of its time, can flatten a quieter line that would play better if left to breathe. Yet even at its most mechanical, the show maintains its core. The family never turns on each other, and society never fully learns but always has the chance to. The moral universe holds. The show's short broadcast life, 2 seasons, should not be misread as failure. Network economics, scheduling competition, and a shifting audience landscape closed many good series in the mid-60s. What matters is afterlife, and here the Addamses are almost undead in the best sense. Syndication forged a loop that introduced the family to new kids every few years. Campus screenings in the 70s reframed the series as countercultural comfort food. Halloween reruns cemented it as the unofficial macabre comedy standard. Merchandise, from lunchboxes to rubber hands, turned its iconography into a language children could carry to school. Just as crucial is how the series whispered to subcultures that would later roar. Gothic kids saw in Morticia an elegance that refused the male gaze without rejecting beauty. Queer audiences caught the wink of a household where difference was not just tolerated but toasted. Immigrant families recognized the outsider comedy of being misunderstood by neighbors and institutions. Neurodivergent viewers saw a home that matched their sensory world, intense, specific, literal in all the best ways. None of this is representation in the contemporary sense, but it is invitation, the kind that makes later, explicit representation possible. The fingerprints spread far. Later horror comedies borrow the show's premise of the oddball household that loves harder than the normal ones around it. Halloween television specials learn that macabre works best when paired with tenderness. Even modern prestige dramedies about eccentric families owe a subtle debt to the Addams blueprint: keep the love intact, push the world to adjust, let the house be a character, and never apologize for a point of view. If you measure television by how many genres it seeds, the 1964 Addams Family is foundational. It is a sitcom, yes, but also a fable, a social cartoon, a gateway to absurdist comfort. It teaches a deceptively simple lesson with formal elegance, that fear often hides in the costume of propriety, and joy often arrives dressed like a ghost. It turns a laugh track into a chorus of acceptance. It proves that a family can be deeply strange and profoundly stable at the same time. So when later adaptations turn up the budget, redesign the costumes, or center new protagonists, what they are really doing is retuning the same instrument. The melody, difference as delight, love as law, satire as hospitality, was composed here. The finger snaps are not just a hook, they are the downbeat for a cultural rhythm that keeps resurfacing every decade or two, whenever the country needs reminding that normal is negotiable. By the time the original series wrapped, it had done something rare. It made a haunted house feel safe without sanding off its edges. It taught younger viewers to laugh at shivers and older viewers to unclench around kids who don't fit a mold. It gave performers archetypes they could revisit and revise for 60 years. Most of all, it carved a tunnel from a magazine cartoonist's imagination to a mass audience's ritual, and left the tunnel lit for anyone weird enough, brave enough, and tender enough to follow. This is why any serious review of the Addams family's legacy must begin in 1964. The show is not a dusty artifact, it is a live wire. Touch it, and you still get a spark. That spark jumps decades, to the cinematic revival that would redefine the family for the 1990s, to animated reincarnations that introduced new generations, to a Netflix era where Wednesday's gaze becomes the cultural lens of a darker, wittier age. But every later shock traces back to this power source. If you felt yourself smiling at the idea of a disembodied hand tidying the living room, if you found comfort in a mother who makes the unusual feel inevitable, if you recognized a version of your own household in a mansion full of oddities, congratulations. You're already a guest of the original series. And you haven't even rung the bell yet.
If the 1964 television series was the spark that lit the Addams Family into American culture, Then the early 1990s films were the explosion that ensured the family's immortality. After 2 decades of reruns, cult fandom, and Halloween ubiquity, the Addamses roared back onto the global stage with The Addams Family, 1991, and Addams Family Values, 1993. These films didn't just revive the characters. They reinvented them with higher stakes, sharper comedy, and gothic visuals that would define the family for a new generation. The long silence in the 1990s context. By the 1980s, television had moved on. Sitcoms like The Cosby Show and Family Ties depicted modern middle-class optimism. The Addamses remained a rerun relic, their mansion doors closed but never forgotten. Yet the cultural conditions for a revival were ripening. Tim Burton had already proven with Beetlejuice 1988 and Edward Scissorhands 1990 that mainstream audiences would embrace gothic comedy. The world was ready again for macabre satire, but this time with cinematic spectacle. Enter Barry Sonnenfeld, a former cinematographer making his directorial debut, and producer Scott Rudin. Together, they resurrected the Addams Family for Paramount Pictures, bringing the mansion back to life with lavish sets, visual effects, and casting choices that became legendary. The 1991 film, The Addams Family. The first film hit theaters in November 1991. It was both a homage to Charles Addams's cartoons and the 1964 series, and a bolder reimagining. The plot revolved around Gomez's long-lost brother Fester returning to the family, but with a twist. He might be an imposter planted by a con artist. Casting mastery, Raul Julia as Gomez. Perhaps the most celebrated Gomez ever. Julia's performance blended charm, mania, and romantic obsession into a mesmerizing whole. Angelica Houston as Morticia. Regal, hypnotic, and utterly iconic. Houston embodied Morticia with such authority that her silhouette alone became a symbol of gothic femininity. Christina Ricci as Wednesday. At just 10 years old, Ricci redefined Wednesday Addams. Her deadpan delivery and menacing wit transformed Wednesday from a quirky child into a cultural archetype of the dark, intelligent outsider. Christopher Lloyd as Uncle Fester. Lloyd gave Fester manic physicality and eccentric warmth, selling both his menace and his loyalty. Jimmy Workman as Pugsley and Judith Malina as Grandmama rounded out the core family. Unlike the TV show's bright sitcom lighting, the film bathed the mansion in gothic shadows, flickering candlelight, and exaggerated architecture. The set itself became a character. Staircases spiraled menacingly, windows gaped like eyes, and every prop oozed strangeness. The humor remained rooted in inversion. Darkness treated as joy, violence as play, but with cinematic polish. Morticia telling bedtime stories about beheadings, Gomez gleefully throwing knives, Wednesday staging a mock execution for Pugsley. These gags thrilled audiences because of their heightened visual style. Though critics were divided, the film was a box office hit, grossing nearly $200 million worldwide. Audiences loved seeing the Addamses larger than life, and Christina Ricci's Wednesday in particular became an instant star. The 1993 sequel, Addams Family Values. If the first film revived the family, the sequel perfected them. Released in November 1993, Addams Family Values is widely considered the superior film, sharper in satire, funnier in execution, and more daring in its themes. The sequel introduced a new villain, Debbie Jelinski, a seductive nanny who marries Uncle Fester for his money and plots to kill him. Meanwhile, Wednesday and Pugsley are sent to a bright, cheerfully oppressive summer camp, leading to some of the franchise's most beloved scenes. Iconic moments. Wednesday's rebellion at summer camp culminates in the legendary Thanksgiving play scene, where she and fellow outcasts set fire to the stage and reclaim their identity. This moment solidified Wednesday as a voice for outsiders everywhere. Debbie's over-the-top villainy, compete with monologues and elaborate murder attempts, provided a campy contrast to the Addams' sincerity. Gomez and Morticia's continued passion remained both hilarious and oddly inspiring. They refused to fade into parental stereotypes. The sequel sharpened its satire of American conformity. The summer camp scenes mocked forced cheerfulness, cultural erasure, and the pressure to assimilate. By contrast, the Addams family's morbid authenticity felt liberating. Critics praised Addams Family values for being darker, funnier, and smarter than its predecessor. Though it underperformed at the box office compared to the 1991 film, it has since become a cult classic, widely regarded as one of the greatest comedy sequels of all time. Cultural impact of the 1990s films. These two films permanently reshaped the Addams Family mythos. Christina Ricci's Wednesday became the definitive version, inspiring generations of goth teens. Angelica Houston's Morticia redefined gothic glamour. Raul Julia's Gomez, tragically one of his final roles before his death in 1994, set a standard of theatrical charm that few could match. The movies proved that the Addams Family was more than a nostalgic relic. They were adaptable icons. In the 1990s, an era of grunge, counterculture, and skepticism of polished suburban ideals, the Addamses once again felt revolutionary. They were outsiders who didn't care to fit in, and that made them heroes. By the mid-1990s, the Addams Family had conquered both television and film, but the legacy didn't stop there. The late 1990s would bring direct-to-video experiments, and the 2010s would see animated reinventions for new audiences. And in 2022, a single character, Wednesday, would carry the torch into the streaming era, becoming a global phenomenon once again.